So I'm going to be explaining how I got my answers for this week's problems. So for the first one, to find the mean of the differences, I just found the differences between the two samples and then added all of those up and divided it by the sample size, which is 10, and got 1.6. And then for the deviation of each D, I subtracted the mean from each score in the samples and then squared that and found the sum to be 16.4. And then the degrees of freedom, you would do 10 minus 1, and that would be 9. So then you divide 16.4 by 9, and you would get 1.82, and square root that to get 1.3498. So the deviation would be 1.35. And then for the standard error of the mean difference, I used the formula of the standard deviation divided by the square root of the sample size. So I did 1.35 divided by the square root of 10, which would turn out to be 0.4269. And then to find t, I used the formula and I plugged into the formula 1.6 divided by 0.43, and I got 3.7209. And then for the critical value, I found the degrees of freedom, which would be 10 minus 1 equals 9. And then it's at a level of 0.05. So I went into the chart and I got 2.262. So my conclusion is, since the t-value is greater than the critical value, we reject the null hypothesis. Therefore, we reject the concept that there isn't a difference between the samples. And then for the second problem, I found the means of each group. So I just added up the scores and then of each group and divided that by 10 because those were the sample sizes. And I got 4 for the first one and 7 for the second one. And then I found the standard deviations by going one sample at a time and finding, and then I subtracted from the first sample that mean from the scores and squared those, added them all up and got 50. And then for the degrees of freedom, it would be 9. So it'd be 50 divided by 9, and then which is 4.44, and square rooted that to get 2.108. And I did the same thing for the second sample too, and that turned out to be 2.108 as well. So the variance would be 4.44, and the standard deviations for each group would both be 2.108. For the standard error of difference of means, I followed this formula and I basically I got the degrees of freedom in there. I got the standard deviation, and then I multiplied that by the standard deviation and then added the degrees of freedom for the second sample and multiplied that by the standard deviation. And then I divided both of the sample size, divided it by the first sample size and the second sample size and subtracted 2 from that. And then I also multiplied 1 over 10 plus 1 over 10 to that. And I just did all of that math. And I got 0.649. On the t, I did 4 minus 7 over 0.649. And I got negative 4.622. And then for the critical value, I had to find the degrees of freedoms for both groups, so, and then add those together. So 10 minus 1 plus 10 minus 1, which would be 9 plus 9, is 18 degrees of freedom at a 0.05 level. So I looked that up in the chart and I got 2.101. So in conclusion, we reject the null hypothesis because the test statistic exceeds the critical value. There is a 5% chance that we've made a type 1 error.